Many people today, as with us, have many different ideas as to what Christianity is and what it teaches. In fact, much of what is known about Christianity is 100% true, but the reality is much of what we know about Christianity is not true as well. And so Christianity has existed now for roughly 2,000 years. And anything that has existed for a long period of time has developed a reputation. And reputations often have a seed of truth in them, but reputations can also a lot of times be exaggerated. Okay? And so if we're going to understand Christianity at all, and not simply what we have heard about Christianity, then we need to understand Jesus. Okay? If we do not understand Jesus, then we do not understand Christianity. And if we do not understand Jesus, then you can't be a Christian if you don't understand Jesus. Okay? And so another way to say it is, I cannot be a follower of Christ if I do not know who Christ is. And so what we're trying to do in this series is encounter Jesus. So we're trying to look at the different stories, the various different stories in which people encountered Jesus, and say, all right, what do we learn about that? Different than other world religions today, no one is born a Christian. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter if your father was a pastor, or if your grandfather was a pastor, or your great-grandfather was a pastor, or your great-great-grandfather was the Pope. If all of that is true of you, which is not likely, that still does not make you a Christian. You may have been born into a Christian home. You may have attended a Christian church. You may have gone to a Christian school growing up. You may have been named after a Christian saint by your parents. But none of these things ever made anyone a Christian. Okay? Christianity is different. Christianity is not forced on anyone by birth, or even by geography, or by your upbringing, or by the amount of years your family has been a part of a certain church, or by the Christian ceremonies you are made to participate in as a child. Okay? No one can force you to be a Christian, just as no one can force you not to be a Christian. Okay? And so the reason for that is a Christian is someone who has made a conscious decision to surrender to Jesus as his or her King and Savior. Therefore, just because you can trace your lineage all the way back to Peter himself does not make you a Christian or make you any closer to God than anyone else. Because what defines a Christian is they have come to a place in their life where they surrender and they make Jesus their King. And you can do that even if your father is the Pope. Or you can not do that even if your father is the Pope. Okay, so what we want to do in this summer series is encounter with Jesus. We want to look at him, we want to consider him, we want to come to know him, and only after we have looked at him and considered him and encountered him can we make a decision to follow. You can't be a Christian if you don't know who Jesus is. The first step is, all right, Jesus, who are you? And so that's what we're going to be doing in this series. I'm also going to use this series to help you make a decision, if you haven't already, on whether or not you're ready to be baptized. So July 9th is our baptism Sunday. And sometimes setting a date for baptism can really help people think about, all right, is now my time to make that decision? Am I ready for that decision? And so hopefully through this series of lessons, you can come to clarity on whether or not that is the next step for you. So 4 things we're going to learn about Jesus from our passage today. Here we are. 3 things. Number 1, we're going to learn about the eternalness of Jesus, found in verses 1 through 3. We're going to learn about the hiddenness of Jesus, found in verses 4 and 5, 9, and 11. And then we're going to learn about the inclusiveness of Jesus in verses 12 through 13. So we're going to talk about those 3 things today. So let's start with the eternalness of Jesus. So one commonly held belief about religion today is that all religions, some of you have heard this before, all religions are fundamentally the same and only superficially different. Have you heard that before? They're all the same. They all, there's a basic foundation to which all religions point. And that is true of many religions, but when it comes to Christianity, the exact opposite is actually true. Okay? Many people believe that all religions are fundamentally the same and only superficially different, but when we look at Christianity, we find it is fundamentally different and only superficially the same. The exact opposite is true with Christianity. So I think nothing makes this more clear than the first 3 verses of the book of John. So it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." So let's talk about that for a moment. The ancient Greek world, which was the world the New Testament was written from, was a pantheistic world. And so what is pantheism? Pantheism is the belief in many gods. And so one theologian called it pan-everythingism because it is the belief in anything and everything. So the Greek pantheistic society believed, first of all, that the main god, Zeus, the main god was similar to an impersonal force or energy that supported or permeated all of existence. And so Star Wars, for example, has a clear pantheistic narrative in which there are many forces, but there is one major force that cannot be known in any way, but you can utilize it. And so we have the powers of good, what do we call them, the rebels. They're using the force of good for good, the force for good, and then we have the evil empire using the force for evil. And so that's a very Greek way of thinking about God. God is this impersonal force, cannot be known, doesn't really have a personality per se, but he's thought of as a mind. He's thought about as a thinking agent that if we could just grasp onto and use, then we'd be doing well. So the fundamental belief of pantheism was that the main god, again, was an impersonal force or energy. And so with this view of the gods came a certain approach to life. The ancient Greeks believed that life existed in 2 dimensions. The top dimension was the spiritual and the important, and then the bottom dimension was the physical or the unimportant. And so the physical world was unimportant, it was passing, it was temporary, but the spiritual world was important and eternal and mattered the most. This 2-dimensional way of reality had implications on how people lived in the world. So, for example, the reason the world did not make any significant scientific or technological advancements until the 14th or 15th century, or the Age of Enlightenment, was because before this time, the physical world was always seen as evil and not worthy of our time. So have you thought about that? Why is it that the Industrial Revolution hit when it hit? Why is it that the knowledge spread so vastly when it hit? Why is it that science became, for the first time, a studied subject of its own? Why is it that it all hit during the 14th and 15th century? And the answer to that is that around the 14th and 15th century, science and technology took off because the Christian gospel began to spread throughout the entire world, and what the Bible said about the physical world, different than what the Greeks said about the physical world, was that the physical world was good, made by a good God, and therefore was worthy of study. And without that impetus from the Christian worldview that the physical was not evil, modern science would never have gotten off the ground. So scientists probably wouldn't like this, but the reality is modern science has the Bible to thank for even getting off the ground, because there was a fundamental worldview change. The Greeks didn't believe, they believed the physical world was evil. In fact, the best thing you could think to do was to get out of your physical body one day and to get into the spiritual world, and you were trying to do that as quickly as possible. And so, for this reason, the resurrection was not really a good idea. Like, oh, great, I get my body back. I don't want that. I've been trying to get rid of it. Fundamental worldview change because the gospel began to spread. So all of that to say this: the impersonal force or energy responsible for supporting and permeating all of existence in the ancient Greek world was called, by the Stoic philosophers of the day, it was called the Logos. Okay? It's where we get our modern term for logic or reason. Okay? So the Greek philosophers would say that if you could discern what the Logos was, if you could reach enlightenment, you could understand the meaning of life. And so in these verses we just read, John uses a word in the Greek to describe Jesus that would have been well known to the people of the day. And so if we were to read this passage in Greek, it literally says, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. Okay? The word he uses to describe Jesus, the word Logos, it was translated into the word word, okay? And so John intentionally used a well-known pantheistic word, and he does something brand new with it. Okay? John says there is a meaning or reason to life. There is an energy or force behind the cosmos. There is a Logos. But here's John's twist on it. It is not an impersonal force you cannot know. It is a personal force come to know you. That's different. That's different. So what John says here is fundamentally different than any other world religion. John says, first of all, that in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. All things were created through the Logos. And then it says in verse 14, the Logos became man, became flesh, and made his dwelling among us. Here's why this is fundamentally different than any other world religion. Every other religion has priests and prophets or gurus who are responsible for helping us find God, right? They basically say, I am man, come to help you find God. But when Jesus comes to earth, Jesus says, I am God, come to find you. That's different. I mean, that's fundamentally different. There's nothing that's superficially the same as nothing. I mean, it is fundamentally different. John tells us from the very start that Jesus is not just a prophet. He is not just a spiritual guide. He is not just a wise teacher. He is not one God among many good God options. John says that Jesus is the only God option. John says that through Jesus, all things were made. Without him, nothing would exist. John says there is a Logos, but the Logos is not an impersonal force that cannot be known. The Logos is a person who came to know you. So the very first thing we know about Jesus and about Christianity is that Christianity is not fundamentally the same as every other religion and only superficially different. Christianity is fundamentally different than every other religion and only superficially the same. Okay? Because it says that Jesus is not temporal, pointing us to the eternal. It says Jesus is the eternal, come to dwell with the temporal. Okay, so we learn first of all about the eternalness of Jesus. Secondly, we learn about the hiddenness of Jesus. Now, this is a little curious. Why is Jesus hiding? But let's think about this together. So verses 4 through 5, it says, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Or your version may say that darkness has not overcome it. Okay? So one thing that's clear as we read John's gospel is that Jesus is misunderstood wherever he goes. Okay? His words are misunderstood. His actions are misunderstood. His intentions are misunderstood. Jesus speaks clearly, yet confuses many. So consider also verses 10 and 11. It says this, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. John says that there is a hiddenness about Jesus. He is out in the open and can't be ignored, but at the same time, people are blind to him. And so I think the clearest example of this is found in John 3 with Nicodemus. So Jesus tells Nicodemus, who was a religious authority, in John 3:3, I tell you the truth, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he's born again. And Nicodemus replies in verse 4, how can a man be born when he's old? Surely he cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb to be born. To which Jesus replies, you are Israel's teacher, and you do not understand these things. I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. How then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? So Nicodemus walks away from this encounter totally dumbfounded by Jesus' words. He heard Jesus, but he did not understand what Jesus said. This is true every chapter. People, they see Jesus, but they don't understand Jesus. He's hidden from them. There's something mysterious about him that they can't understand. So Jesus is out in the open, but his identity is hidden from so many. In fact, consider Jesus' own words. So Mark 4, Jesus said this to his disciples, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you. But to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing, but never perceiving, and ever hearing, but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. Now consider another place. Jesus said to the disciples, this is Matthew 13, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Okay? Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. So not only is Jesus hidden from so many people, but he also says that he speaks in parables so that he will be hidden from people. So the question arises, why is Jesus trying to hide? Like, doesn't he want us to know who he is? How do we understand this? Well, I want you to look at Matthew 13:14, or listen to 13:14 again. Here's what he said. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. So the reason Jesus was hidden from many was not because he did not want them to see, but because they did not want to see him. They had closed their eyes. They had stopped their ears, and their hearts had become calloused. So Jesus knew this, and so he spoke in parables as a testimony to the calloused state of their hearts. In fact, I think Jesus probably would have said, if your hearts weren't calloused, I'd speak to you more clearly. But I'm going to speak to you in parables because you won't understand me anyway. You're not listening. But to those who did listen, he said that the secrets of the knowledge of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you. Okay? So, the fact that they did not understand Jesus, again, was used as a testimony to the fact that they could not see. What's interesting in the Gospels, though, is that not everyone is blind to who Jesus is. Not everyone. Most people are, but not everyone. Some people can actually see. So who are the people that can actually see? Well, the ones who can actually see are those in the Gospels who believe they are blind. So that sounds a little oxymoronic, doesn't it? In John 9, for example, Jesus heals a man born blind, and the Pharisees, who are those who believe they can see, get mad at Jesus because he healed a man who was blind. He healed him on the Sabbath. And so the blind man said to Jesus in John 9, he said, for judgment I have come into this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what? Are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So here's what that means. Jesus says that the litmus test of sight, the evidence that a person can actually see, is that they believe they are blind. And that the first sign that somebody is actually blind is that they believe they can see. The reason Jesus was hidden from so many was because so many believed they could see. We got it together, man. We're not that bad. We're not perfect. We're not, at least we're not like those people. What, are we blind too? Come on. Like, we're the good people of this city. You know, I got this Bible thing figured out, man. I got it memorized. What more do you want? They think they can see. And the ones who can see I'm not like those people. Right? So this often happens in celebrate recovery. So the first time to get to celebrate recovery is the toughest because if I enter those doors, then I'm saying like that I'm one of those people. And then, give them a few weeks and they realize, oh, I am one of those people. All right? So those who are blind are the ones who can see. The blind people, on the other hand, the people who can see, on the other hand, are the arrogant ones who actually think they're pretty good. And so the Pharisees again said, Jesus, what were we blind? Come on. So, the reason Jesus is hidden from so many is because so many are blind to their own sin. The Bible says that our hearts become calloused, our eyes become blind, and our ears become deaf when we fail to see our own sin and believe that we can see everyone else's sin so clearly. Okay? Folks, nothing will make you blind more quickly than the subtle opinion that you can actually see. Okay? And the ones who go away justified in the presence of Jesus are those like the blind beggar who yell at the top of their lungs as Jesus passes by, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. To ask for mercy is to ask God to give you something you don't deserve. But the spiritually blind people of the world actually think they deserve some things. They deserve what they've earned. They deserve God's favor, at least more than that guy does. They deserve the status they have obtained. They may not completely deserve it, but they certainly believe they deserve it more than others. And Jesus says, you are blind, and what I have said you will never understand until you admit you're blind. Okay? So we see the eternalness of Jesus. He's not the same. He's not fundamentally the same. He's fundamentally different. And the second thing we see is the hiddenness of Jesus in the fact that the only ones who can see Jesus and understand what he is saying are those who believe they are blind. And that is humbling. Because I want to know that I'm, hey, I got a college education, man. I got 2 of them. And that's blindness. If I'm using that as a stepping stone above somebody else, that's blindness. Okay. Thirdly and lastly, we see the inclusiveness of Jesus. Okay. Verses 11 through 13 say this. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision, or of a husband's will, but born of God. So there's a very real sadness, I think, in verse 11. I think it's very important to see. You may have had this experience of sadness if you've ever moved away from a place and then moved back at some point in time. So Marcy and I and the kids, as you may know, spent 10 years in New Jersey before we moved back here to New Hampshire. And so I know that if at any point I were to move back to New Jersey, things would not instantly be the same way they were. Because 3 years, or 3.5 years now, changes a lot, right? So people have formed new relationships. They have new jobs. They're in new life circumstances than they were when we left. They're engaged in new routines. The neighborhood we lived in has changed dramatically, whereas if we were able to move back into our old townhome, likely none of our former neighbors would still be there. And if they were there, it is not likely that we would just pick back up right where we left off. Too much has changed. And if we were to move back there with the expectation that things would return to the way they were 3.5 years ago, I think we would quickly be gripped by a stunning sadness. we would say to ourselves, we moved back to that which was our own, but our own did not receive us. They remember us, but they moved on. We were close friends, but it could be that we are no longer their closest friends. Okay? So if you've ever experienced this, you likely felt very sad. You moved away for a while, moved back, and things were different. They just weren't. And it's not that they forgot you, but inevitably, time and space change human relationships. In fact, in a situation like I just described, the fault for the change would actually fall on us, on Marcy and I, because we were the ones who initiated the change. We're the ones that moved away. So when John said he came into the world, he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him, there was a deep sadness in that statement, because when Jesus came to that which was his own, he was not the one responsible for changing the relationship. He didn't move away. Jesus, as the creator of the world, as one with the Father, in selecting the Israelite people to be his own, Jesus never stepped away from the relationship. When Jesus comes to earth, he cannot be charged with moving away. They cannot say, well, if you'd been here this whole time, we would not now be rejecting you. Because Jesus had been there the whole time. Jesus would say to Nathanael in this very same chapter, he said, Nathanael, I saw you while you were under the fig tree before Philip called you. And that's a little thing, but what that said to Nathanael was, Jesus saw me, even though I didn't see him. Okay? So when Jesus is incarnated into the world, he does not come saying, hey guys, sorry I was gone for so long, but I'm here now. He comes saying, I was with you this whole time, but you did not see me. And if you've ever left a place and then suddenly experienced a rejection by the people you were closest to, if you've never left a place, but then suddenly experienced rejection, so for instance, maybe you do something dumb, and all of a sudden you're kind of cut off from your family, you know that rejection is harder than if you moved away. Because you know, well, hey, I moved away, things change. But if they reject me, and there's been no time and space gap, you know that that's much worse. When Jesus incarnates the world and come to that which was his own, he would have experienced the feeling of deep rejection because he had never left. He was always there, and yet they did not recognize him. But I want you to notice the inclusiveness of Jesus in verse 12. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Jesus comes and experiences rejection, but opens the door of his kingdom to any who would believe in his name. And so if I moved back to New Jersey and was rejected, I'd probably say to myself, fine, be that way. I'm going back to where I just came from. Right? But Jesus didn't do that. Jesus experienced rejection, but held out the hope that some would still receive him. And so here's something astonishing that I want to close with. Astonishing about this. How many of you enjoy job interviews? Good. Don't raise your hand. I hate them. Right? I mean, I hate them. I hate them because you feel so inferior, right? You show up in your best attire, having rehearsed all of the answers to the questions you think they will ask you, and the whole time you're sitting there, you're thinking to yourself, will they accept me or will they reject me? Will they accept me or will they reject me? I'm not a part yet, but I want to be a part. I need, all these things. It's horrible. I hate job interviews. This is the way, I think, many people feel about religion today. They live the best they know how. They look pretty. They rehearse all the right lines. They go to church on the major religious holidays. They try to be good to people. But they do it all as if to get ready for a Judgment Day interview. They live a good life in the hopes that when they get to Judgment Day, God will hire them. But that's not what Christianity says. Christianity says God is the interviewee, not the interviewer. Christianity says God came to earth to accept you, but you must now decide if you hire him. Okay? Christianity says God is the one who is suited up for the interview, not you. You must decide if God gets the job of ruling your life, because in coming to earth, God had already decided he wanted to be the ruler of your life. Okay? To all who received him, to all who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Folks, Christianity is not for those who interview the best. Christianity is for those who, upon interviewing Jesus in his word and considering who he is, decide to hire him as their ruler. Jesus comes to earth and says, "You're hired." But he waits for us to accept the position. And get this, there is nothing you can do to make him more ready to hire you. It doesn't matter, what you show up for the interview with. It doesn't matter, how many rehearsed lines of the right answers you give. You cannot make Jesus one whit more ready to hire you. The fact that Jesus came to earth says, "I'm hiring you. Now, will you hire me?" Okay. Jesus has your name tag ready and has made your access keys ready in your desk drawer. He has an incredible insurance policy waiting for you, and the sort of work he will have you do is like nothing you've ever done before, but now you are the interviewer. You must now decide if he gets the job, because on the cross, he already decided that you get the job. You got the job, but do you want him as your boss? Christianity is the most inclusive religion in the world because it says God came to hire everyone. He did not come to hire the good. He came to hire everyone, but now everyone must individually decide if they want to hire him as their ruler and master. Nothing is more inclusive than a God who incarnates the world and says, I came to hire. In fact, you're hired. You're hired! On the cross, you're hired. Now, will you hire me? Will you hire me? Everyone must now decide if they will let go of the reins of their life and let Jesus take the wheel, as the song says. Will you let Jesus take the wheel of your life, or will you continue to try to make yourself good enough for your Judgment Day interview? On the cross, Jesus made you perfect for the interview. Now, do you want to work for him or not, is the question. The Logos. The Logos. God with us. Not an impersonal God, but a God who comes to know you in the person of Jesus Christ. So we see the eternalness of Jesus, we see the hiddenness of Jesus, and lastly, we see the inclusiveness of Jesus. So have you hired Jesus yet? You hired him by receiving him. You hired him by believing in him and being baptized. Are you there yet? All right, we're going to pause now, and we're going to take our weekly communion time. This is for those of you who have already decided to hire Jesus as your boss, so to speak. We take these emblems to remember that on the cross, he made us worthy of hire. And so we take the bread and we dip it in the juice and we take it together as a communion, as a communing with Jesus himself. After this, I'll get back up, and if there's any questions you have about this particular passage, you can ask it, and then we will close with one song in prayer. All right, so please stand. We're going to pray, and then we'll take communion together.